On behalf of the City of White Plains, I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining us today as we honor our fellow countrymen, both men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice in defending our country so that we could be here today. Memorial Day, a federal holiday since 1967, originated from the American Civil War to honor the Union and Confederate Day. During the early 20th century, the occasion has been extended to recognize all Americans who have sacrificed their life during military conflict. Their sacrifice should inspire in us a profound sense of gratitude for the freedoms we enjoy. Let us vow to never forget their sacrifices. I'd like to give a special welcome and acknowledge the sailors and Marines who have joined us today visiting us from Fleet Week. Ladies and gentlemen, all those who are able, please rise. For the colors have already been put in place by the Rivertown Young Marines and our national anthem by the White Plains High School Marching Band. Please remain standing. I'd like to invite the Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to bring up Kevin Fisher for the invocation.
Thank you. Today we are here to honor those that have served our country and have given their lives so that we may stand here and still live in freedom. We need to be constantly reminded of our gift of freedom and of those who have gave all to make sure future generations continue to know life in a free and democratic society. Remembering those that have passed is only half the task that is before us today. We must carry their love, honor, and duty forward to the future generations that will pass. Our children must know who they were, what they did, why they did it. To do anything less will be disservice to their sacrifice and to their memories. Those that have taken the oath of service created a clear pathway for us to continue on. We must never waver from that path of freedom and democracy. Take their memories, take their dreams, and walk forward shouldering the cause of freedom. Carry it high and proud. They did, and now you must walk forward for them. Thank you.
You may be seated. Today's ceremony honoree is Barney Marason, World War II U.S. Army. Mayerson. Barney, will you? Barney. Barney was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York on June 14, 1923, also called Flag Day. He left Cornell in 1943 and enlisted in the Army. He ended up in the 106th Infantry Division in 1944. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge and became a prisoner of war from December 1944 to May 1945. In 1945, after the Japanese surrendered, Barney was discharged from the Army. He got 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star for bravery. Barney came home, married his sweetheart Ethel, and settled in White Plains from 1955 to 78. He has 3 children, Janet, Barbara, and Mark. Thank you. Our deceased honoree is Joe Davis, World War II U.S. Air Corps. Joe Davis was the first black fireman in the city of White Plains. Appointed on April 13, 1949. Joe was born in 1921 into a family with 5 children in Sheldon, South Carolina, and moved to White Plains at the age of 8. He attended school in White Plains, including Ferris Avenue, Battle Hill, and White Plains High School. He served in World War II in the 477th Bomb Group, an outfit on record as one of the most outstanding military units in the Air Force, which was then a part of the Army. He spent part of his military hitch working in a support group for the famous Tuskegee Airmen. Joe Davis passed away on November 5th, 2017. I'd now like to bring up Cindy Abbott Kaufman from Daughters of Liberty's Legacy for the reading of Flanders Field.
In Flanders Fields was written by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, a World War I Canadian Army surgeon who saw that wild poppies sprang up in the ditches of cemeteries in Europe and was so moved to write this poem. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
We'll now read the list of White Plains deceased veterans from 2017-18. I'd like to bring up Dennis Jones and Kevin Fisher to join me. James Michael Amon, Eugene S. Baker, Joseph P. Barracano, Jeremiah J. Barry, Vernon Batchelor, John Benedetto, Morris Aaron Benjaminson, Joseph Berger, David B. Brout, William Purdy Burpo Jr., William F. Chapman, Paul D. Chaika, James P. Cullen, Cleo N. Daniels, Joseph Davis, Merle E. Davis, Dominic J. DiBattista, Joseph V. DeToya, Marvin Dingett, Devoid F. Eller, Dominic G. Finelli, Martin Finn, Edward J. Finnerty, Samuel G. Fredman, Gilbert Robert Gabriel Jr., Noel C. Galen, Albert Gallarello, Vincent Gandel, Frank C. Ganozzi, Ronald Neil Gottlieb, James T. Gunset, Roger Gwinner.
Lawrence Adam Haggerty, John W. Harrington Jr., Edgar L. Harrison III, Merwin R. Haskell Jr., Monroe Heidecorn, Eric Allen Holmquist, William N. Jenkins, Samuel Johnson, Edward J. Cairns Jr., Stephen Michael Katcher, Burton Katz, John A. O'Keefe, James J. King, William H. Kircher, Arthur Bernard Kramer, Philip C. Larkin, Eric C. Labers, Vincent F. LeBlanc, Ronaldo F. Ledon, Arthur Leone, Thomas Anthony Malarkey, Richard Maranka, Daniel V. Martins, Nelson A. Merritt, Nicholas Migliaccio, Robert S. Miller III, John J. Morley, Ralph J. Nagin, John Noon, Dante Jane Paccia, Robert E. Palmer, Joseph N. Palmieri, Michael J. Pantuliano, Jason S. Parker, Attilio Perry,
John S. Petrish, Christopher Phoenix II, Stanley C. Post Jr., Stephen Ralston, John Raymond Jr., Jack Rochard, Stanley Sands, Richard Schneller, Samuel Score, William Lester Sheldon, John J. Sherlock, Sid Silverman, Bernard U. Small Sr., Alonzo Smith Jr., Peter Solana, John H. Talbot, Fred Thomas, Frank Toto, Francis A. Vanderhoof, Pasquale J. Biccioni, Ronald O. Walker Sr., Bernard Weber, William F. Young. May they all rest in peace. I'm now going to read the names of all the service members from Westchester, New York, who have given the ultimate sacrifice since September 11th, 2001. Michael A. Arcola, David Ayala, Ku Haik Chai, Kevin A. Cumming, Philip T. Esposito, David R. Fahy Jr., Edward J. Frank II, Justin R. Garcia, Merlin German, Bernard G. Gooden, Courtney Hollinsworth, Gifford Hurt, Eric A. Jones, Anthony L. Caladine, Anthony Santos Lagman, Joseph Lem, Manuel Lopez III, John Malone, John Pryor, Efron Sanchez Jr., Steve Havalovas, Robert Charles White III. Thank you.
I'd now like to bring up our mayor, Mayor Tom Roach.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. I especially want to thank those in military service, those who are veterans who served our country, as we come here today to recognize and honor those who gave everything for their country. I have the pleasure of presenting this proclamation I have for me for Barney Mayerson. You heard about Barney's service to our country in World War II. He has served the country with distinction and valor. And I think he's another example of when these veterans returned, they didn't just come back and sit around. They came back and really worked to make this country great for all of us that enjoy it today. So they helped to save it, and then they came back and helped to build it. And for that reason, I would at this time present this proclamation and ask that to thank Barney for his service to the greater good and all that he has done for our country. And I don't think anyone from Joe Davis's family is with us here today, so we'll present that to him at a later time. You weren't born on the 4th of July, but Flag Day is close, you know. If he had written the words a little differently, it would have been a little more fun for you. But I'm always honored to be here on this day. I mean, as you know, we were standing on the reviewing stand and the marching band was playing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I think it's very appropriate. It's something for all of us to remember. I think I did not serve in the military, but when it was 1968, 1969, 1970, I watched every draft age male in my family, my uncles and their cousins who were like additional uncles to me, go into the service, some to Vietnam, one to Germany, one was on the Forrestal, and it seemed the most normal thing in the world, and we wrote them letters and we welcomed them home. But of course they weren't all welcomed home in this country after the Vietnam War. But when you are called up to serve your country, and you answer that call, it is something that should be honored. And for those who actually lose their lives in defense of their nation, it is important that we remember it. They gave everything they had, and we're asked to do very little in this country. You're asked to vote. You're asked to serve on jury duty every 6 years. And I think you should be asked to treat with dignity and responsibility the rights and freedoms that these people gave their lives to give us. I can tell you this, when I talk to my uncles who served, I talk to my dad who served, they never talk about the politics of the people they served with. They love these guys, they visit them, they write to them. Now with the internet, my father gets a reunion every year, but that's not what they're thinking about. They went to fight for their country, they went to serve their country. And I think we all owe them, if nothing else, to treat what they fought for and gave us with dignity. To try and remember that it's not so hard to listen to someone say something you don't agree with and just listen to it and hear what they're saying and maybe say something, maybe engage in reasoned discourse, but not the level that sometimes we see today is really disturbing to me, and I think it's something that we should remember today, because the question I always ask when I come to Memorial Day is, everyone says, well, you know, we all thank the veterans, but Veterans Day is for the veterans. This is for the people that gave their lives, and it's hard because how do we really honor them? So we honor them by coming out today, but I think we also can honor them by treating the things that many of us take for granted as the precious gifts that they are. The Battle Hymn of the Republic was written because this republic was in danger of collapsing. There was armed insurrection against the United States of America within our borders, and it was defeated through the bravery of people, some of whom are in their last resting place right here. So that's how I look at it. I think it's something that, George McGovern, right, Democrat, John McCain, Republican, both heroes. George McGovern flew 25 bomber missions over Germany in World War II. The casualty rate was 50% for those guys, and they got in that plane and did those jobs. John McCain, a prisoner who stayed in prison until the people that he served with could be released. So that's what I want to remember on Memorial Day, because we all have our moments, and that's what I remember when I have those moments. I'm so honored to be able to present a proclamation to Ed Dunphy, our Grand Marshal. I know Ed for years. I knew him as the city attorney when I first came on the council. We worked together on so many things. I always appreciated his knowledge, his level-headedness and his willingness to work with everybody. Just the things I was talking about a moment ago. And I knew that Ed had served in Vietnam, and that is something that always, when I hear that, always means a lot to me. And I'm glad that he's being honored today. As we were walking up the parade route, and I'm thinking all the reasons why people fight for their country, and I thought Ed walking up Broadway with his grandchildren and his children and his wife, and that's what it boils down to, I think. And it's so beautiful to see. Ed was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. He served with the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, and beginning in September 1970. He was assigned as a forward observer and operated within the DMZ and the Ashaw Valley. And he was awarded the Air Medal for successfully participating in more than 25 sustained aerial missions over hostile territory in support of counterinsurgency operations. The Air Medal is awarded to members of the U.S. Armed Forces who have distinguished themselves by meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flight. Ed later served as Fire Direction Control Officer to B Battery, 2nd Battalion, 319th Artillery, where he defended Fire Support Base Ripcord as his last tour of duty. Ed served as Battalion Fire Direction Control Officer at Camp Evans, and Ed was awarded the Bronze Star for heroism in ground combat. The Bronze Star Medal is awarded to members of the U.S. Armed Forces for heroic achievement, heroic service, meritorious achievement, or meritorious service in a combat zone. And the City of White Plains proudly salutes Ed Dunphy for his service to the greater good. He has served his country with distinction and valor and has earned our esteem and appreciation. And now, therefore, it be resolved that I, Mayor Thomas M. Roach, ask White Plains residents to observe the national moment of remembrance established by Congress and pause at 3 p.m. today for a duration of 1 minute in an act of national unity to honor those who died for our freedom. And at this time, I would all ask you to join me in welcoming and thanking Ed Dunphy. You're not done. Ed, your service is not finished.
Thank you, Mayor Roach, members of the Common Council, County Legislator Boykin, honored guests, friends, and family. It's our duty to remember. These words, this petition, is inscribed along with the names of 58,220 brave men and women in the black granite of the Vietnam Memorial in our nation's capital. On this most solemn occasion, on the 150th anniversary of Memorial Day, with that plea in mind, I would like to tell you a story, a very little known story actually, and one that has not been reported greatly in the media. This is a story about men and a battle that occurred in 1970 on a remote hilltop 48 years ago. And to show that this was not some minor skirmish, this engagement has been labeled as the last major battle for U.S. forces in Vietnam. Some 6 months after I was in country, I was assigned to Fire Base Ripcord. We received orders to reopen and reoccupy this base. We had been there once before in December of that year. When we left that fire base sometime in early January, each one of us who were there had an ominous feeling. Unfortunately, that ominous feeling was realized some 3 months later. This fire base, as Mayor Roach indicated, was situated on the fringe of the Ashaw Valley. Now, the Ashaw Valley was a major thoroughfare, and I mean a major thoroughfare, for supplies coming from the north to the south. Tons of supplies flowed annually through the valley. And in it, a couple of things that you should note about this fire base. Why they picked it is beyond me, because we weren't on most military operations, you take the highest point. This wasn't the highest point. There were 3 mountaintops higher than us, so the enemy could look down upon us with ease. In any event, after arrival there in early March, at first things were calm. However, we realized only later that the North Vietnamese were watching us, observing our routines, and waiting for that opportune moment. What we did not know was that the North Vietnamese had massed between 25 and 30,000 soldiers for the assault on this one fire base. Opposing this large force were 600 U.S. soldiers. Once the siege of Fire Base Ripcord began, it lasted for 4.5 months. From March 12th to July 23rd, 1970, with the heaviest combat taking place from July 21st to July 23rd of that year, when we abandoned that fire base once more and for the final time. During this prolonged battle, which saw sporadic hand-to-hand combat, the 101st lost 139 men. This made it the fourth most costly battle in terms of lives lost, behind more well-known battles such as Ia Drang Valley and Khe Sanh. With losses that high, you might wonder why more supplies and aid was not sent. For that, there is an answer, actually. It's quite simple. At the time, the country was reeling from what was happening overseas. We were reeling from the fallout of Tet Offensive, which took place 2 years prior to that. And the country was disillusioned and upset with the mounting cost in lives and material. In addition, President Nixon recently had ordered the beginning of troop withdrawal from Southeast Asia, which also explains in part why the siege of Ripcord did not and has not received extensive media coverage. Because we were embarking on a major offensive while the country is being told that hostilities are winding down. In addition, it was thought that the country could not stand the publicity as it had a year ago in May of 1969, when the 101st was tasked with taking another nearby hilltop, which came to be known as Hamburger Hill. As a result of those thoughts, all media were banned from Ripcord and that area of operations. As I mentioned, after 4.5 months, the siege was over. Who won? Who lost? Well, that's a matter of perspective. It was a brutal confrontation between two opposing forces. If it were not for the dogged, unyielding fighting spirit of the 101st and the superior air power, the losses to this nation might have been greater. But by extracting all forces from that area in July of that year, the route was now wide open for the North to supply its forces in the South, which, as we know, did happen. Even though that remote hilltop was abandoned 48 years ago, it is our duty to recall and remember those brave 139 men who gave their last great measure. It is our duty not to abandon their memory as we did that fire base, but rather it is our solemn duty to remember each and every one and the sacrifices they made. If you take but one thing away from today's ceremony on this day of remembrance, it is my wish that you remember this. Throughout this encounter for Fire Base Ripcord, a barren, pockmarked hilltop in the mountain regions of that Southeast Asia country where U.S. forces were outnumbered 5-1. The 101st, in the greatest traditions, fought bravely with distinction and valor. And for all who were there, it can be said with confidence, all gave some gave all. And it is for those who gave their all whom we now remember. Thank you for all attending.
I'd like to acknowledge that we're joined today by County Legislator Ben Boykin, Councilman Dennis Crolian, and Councilwoman Milagros Dacona. We'll now have lowering the colors to half-staff by the Rivertown Young Marines. I'd like to call up Mayor Thomas Roach and Commander Kevin Lasher for the placement of the city wreath. I'd now like to call up the police and fire departments for the placement of the home defense wreath. We'll now have the placement of the White Plains Historical Society wreath. Placement of the Daughters of American Revolution wreath. Placement of the Daughters of Liberty's Legacy in honor of deceased servicemen of the USS Westchester County. I'd like to call the American Legion Auxiliary Post number 135 for the poppy placement. And we'd like to have the White Plains High School Marching Band lead us in a patriotic medley. Thank you. I'd like to bring up Diane Travers for the benediction from the Ladies Auxiliary Jewish War Veterans Post number 191.
Heavenly Father, before we part, we pray that the inspiration of this hour not quickly fade, but that it remain with us throughout the days ahead. Grant strength to those who have newly entered into the ranks of services of the United States of America. Endow them with a willing and steadfast spirit to carry on our worthy endeavors. May they ever be dedicated and committed to the principles of our veterans in our way of life. Help them, O Lord, to give of themselves in supporting our country. May their service to our fraternity help in the attainment of our highest ideals. Please watch over them and bless them all. Amen.
We'll now have a rifle salute to the departed veterans from the firing squad of American Legion Post number 135, followed by taps. Please note on the back of your brochure of the program, the flags of honor, which are flying along Main Street, and they'll be flying there for a week in honor of veterans. That concludes today's program. You may join us at post number 135, the American Legion Post, for some refreshments. Thank you all for joining us today.
Can we do a quick interview with them? We'll take